Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Lib Dem Podcast. Before we get into the main part of our episode talking about how the election's feeling at the moment, we just want to give a little tribute from everyone here at the Lib Dem Podcast to people who are standing down this year, because obviously lots of people are excited about making gains and new candidates, but actually we want to pay tribute to the people that have been behind the scenes, sometimes the people that don't get a lot of attention, who have been the stalwarts of Liberal Democrat local parties and councillor groups for many years. And in my patch, that person's Pauline Brown, who for 21 years has been a Lib Dem councillor during all the good times and the bad times, lost her seat, got it back, and she'll be stepping down in a few days' time and retiring as a councillor. And Pauline has been a tremendous asset for the Preston Lib Dems, despite everything that's happened to her, including her son being killed. And despite all these personal tragedies, she has kept going. She has loved being a councillor. She loves going to committee meetings. She has loved making a difference. And so, like, these people won't get lots of attention. People like Pauline Brown won't be known outside of the little Preston part of the world that we occupy. But it's people like that that keep our party going. So to all the Pauline Browns out there in all the local parties, thank you very much for everything you've done. Welcome to the Lib Dem Podcast. Welcome back to the Lib Dem Podcast. We have been busy campaigning for a couple of weeks, but we wanted to get an episode in before the local elections, just so, we can keep up our trend of predicting everything terribly. So my name is John Potter. I am the leader of the Preston Lib Dems, and I host this Lib Dem Podcast.
Hi, I'm Martin Boffey. I'm the leader of the Liberal Democrat group on Horsham District Council, and I'm happy to join John today.
Right. So, Martin, we are going to get into a little bit of how it's feeling on the doors, how the election's coming along. But I think we'll put a bit of context of where the Lib Dems are coming in to this election. So I'm not going to talk about national polling because it's been pretty static in terms of where Lib Dems are. But if we look at, and thank you to our wonderful friends at the ALDC who produce these wonderful charts, they do the research so I don't have to. So Lib Dems have made the most gains of any party in by-elections since it happened. So we're up 25. However, we always say on all this, and we said this after the local elections last year, there were 5 losses during that thing. So for all the celebration of us doing well, we also remember there will be people who have put their heart and soul into being a Lib Dem and have come on the wrong side of a result. Yeah. But generally, it's looking quite well over the year, isn't it, Martin?
It is indeed. I mean, actually, in Horsham, we went through a real spate of by-elections. I actually came in on a by-election myself, and we won 4 in a row. But I mean, 3 of those were defences, but one of them was a gain. And then we had a 5th one. We didn't manage to quite get there down in the south, but the Greens took it off the Tories instead of us. So that's a 50-50 there, but it's certainly been good for us, and it's not been very good for the Conservatives over that period.
And I suppose one of the other things that the LDC has also done is looked at the vote share increases and decreases, and even split it out by region, which is really interesting. So obviously, I'm going to do a little bit of Northwest promotion that we are joint third top with nearly a 9% increase in Lib Dem vote across those by-elections, which is very healthy. But the West Countries comes in second at 9.4% increase. And, as much as it galls me to say that Yorkshire's doing better than the Northwest, but they are doing better with a massive 28% increase in their vote. So I don't know what's happened. It must have been some areas where we've done relatively little activity and gone on to do quite a lot. But again, all signs leading to us that we're doing quite well.
I'm sure lots of people are getting to know Hannah Kitching and her colleagues, absolutely. So that might well have something to do with it.
And we go into the local elections. So the plan was, 2019 was a very, very good year for the Lib Dems. And we do see a lot of this in the national coverage of the local elections. What there is that, will the Lib Dems do particularly well because we did well in 2019? I suppose the thing we have to remember is that 2019 is 4 years on from 2015, which was horrendous. Yeah. So even though 2019 was a brilliant year, 700 odd gains, it brought us almost back up to par of where we should be.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, it's going on about my area. It was before I was really involved. But 2015 was on the same day as the general election. We were a 44-seat council back then. We were reduced down to 4 in 2015. 4 years later, in 2019, we managed to go up to 13. But because we'd been coming from such a low base, we'd only actually been able to contest 29 of those seats out of the now 48 council, and there was half a dozen wards we didn't even have any candidates in. So I think we were riding a bit of a wave of the Brexit wars at the time. So it's a very different world now to where it was 4 years ago, and that again very much so from the 4 years before. I think we've had that kind of that Brexit sort of epoch almost start to fade away, but rather hopefully, fortunately, before us, it's been replaced by the most chaotic Conservative administration and party and leadership I've ever seen in my lifetime. So, I think we should still be optimistic about the prospects for where we're going to go to. But I have to say as well, there is an epic level of expectation management going on from the Conservative Party at the moment, talking about, we think we're going to lose 1,000 seats. I think this is largely designed so that they could, if they lose 500 seats, they can say, well, we did quite well, actually.
Well, yeah, I mean, that happens every election in everything, whether it's national, local, whatever. Although they did try that gig in 2019 and did lose 1,000 seats. So we'll see how they do. But, I mean, you brought into a thing about candidates. Now, obviously, in good news for the Lib Dems is that we've actually had a 7% increase in our candidates in the last 4 years, which is good. I mean, it's still not where we would want. We would love to have a full slate everywhere, but the practical reality is that some areas we are just not strong enough. There are black hole areas where Lib Dems just need to get a presence. Sometimes it just needs one person to start a movement going. But it is our best effort in 15 years in terms of candidates, and to all 4,816 of us, including myself, including you, who are up this year, all the best, and keep going for it. But actually, it is interesting we talk about finding candidates. How have you, there has been data from the things that volunteer levels are up for the Lib Dems, but how was it finding candidates? We still, I mean, brutally honest, I think it's always still quite a struggle. But how have you found it, Martin?
Well, it's been tough, but I think probably not as tough as it's been possibly from a couple of other parties. But we're fortunate to have an absolutely fantastic local party chairman called Sarah Ullman, who has to take the lion's share of the credit for getting us a full slate of 48 candidates. But let's just say it's a good thing that there's telephone call plan packages these days, because I think her use of the telephone over the last sort of 18 months has been quite incredible. And it is tough getting candidates, and we didn't land on our full slate until just before the elections. But I mean, it's the first time our local party's managed it in 24 years to actually get a full slate, and we are actually the only party in our district who's managed it. Conservatives have controlled Horsham District Council for 24 years, and even they haven't got a full slate of candidates this time. So it's it has been tough, but it's really important, and it's really great to see that we're up to that sort of 60% seats being contested this time.
And actually, just to think for the other parties, Labour stayed exactly static at 77%, and the Tories have dropped from I think, I can't remember exactly. There were high 90s, and I think they've dropped to mid 90s now, which was the Tories.
And I think also the Green Party are continuing to basically copy the ALDC playbook by they've made a very big play of trying to contest every seat as well, in that they're up to. Even they're up to 47 seats contested in our district, one behind us, with the Conservatives on 46. So they've also cottoned on to the importance of that visibility.
But nationally, I don't think see in Preston, there's only one Green candidate out of 17. See, that's the thing. So they've all but collapsed in Preston, whereas they're a little bit stronger just north in Lancaster. So, but I mean, generally, and anyone who thought Reform or anyone else coming in, their figures are really, really low. So actually, I do wonder what this will mean going forward into the general in terms of representation and being able to get some campaigning momentum going, because voting becomes a habit, and so this is why we talk about 2 and 3 year campaigns to try and get your voters used to voting Lib Dem. So that's why. But well done to everyone, whether you're a paper candidate, whatever you're doing. And I will give one story. So we had a seat where we've always been interested in, but never quite had the resource to do it. It's Preston Rural East, so it's an area that we would like to do. It's got natural Lib Dem kind of voter territory, but we've never had. So we had a lady who says, like, I want to. She's moved into that ward. She wants to do it, but she might not be able to do a full-throated campaign this time. And then suddenly one of the Tory councillors resigns from that ward, so we have a double election in that ward. So suddenly we've gone from, we're not going to be doing lots to, actually, we're going to do a fair whack. But she's taken it very well. So thank you to, like I say, to everyone that's put themselves forward. I suppose, Martin,
Can I just say one other thing about candidate recruitment that, we're really, really pleased to have got 48 candidates. We're also pleased that we are doing our bit to try and bring, shall we say, the average age of the council chamber down a notch or two, which I wouldn't say necessarily the Conservatives have been quite as successful with their slate, but it is still very hard yards improving the actual diversity of your candidate list. I mean, you just want to be able, we want to change that, but there's still work to do in terms of the number of female candidates and the diversity of candidates, and that's very much still on our target for the future. But we needed to get a full slate first.
Yeah, and I think it is kind of reflected, and it was very interesting because I did the BBC Radio Lancashire local election debate this last week, and all 4 representatives were male. And what was interesting about that, and the BBC really tried to find a female representative from any of the parties to be on the panel, and none were available or willing to come forward. So it is and that's based on the fact there's just not enough kind of female and candidates who are putting themselves forward. It's a real big thing. Because like I mentioned at the top of the show that Pauline, our ex-leader, is stepping down. Basically, and we haven't found a female candidate to replace her. But we need to think about this going forward and actively encourage women to get involved.
Yeah, but at least but what I will say is we've managed to get some very, very strong female candidates, and they are standing in our target wards. So obviously, hopefully that we're optimistic about getting them actually into the council as well.
Yeah. So let's talk about one of the big issues that keeps on flaring up, and was on Twitter also a few days ago. It's about voter ID. Now, voter ID has come on, and what that means going forward, because obviously we've had candidate briefings and agents briefings on that. So I think everyone listening to this will agree it isn't needed. There's no evidence for it. It's basically voter suppression because the Tories are so unpopular. So, but how are you finding it out and about? How are people reacting to it? What has the response been within your group and on the doors, Martin?
Well, I mean, we've been putting a lot of messaging about it on our literature to do our bit to make sure that people are aware of it. Personally, when I've been knocking on doors, most of the time people are, indeed, most of the time people are aware already. Maybe that's a self-selecting bunch of people that we're talking to when we're canvassing to a certain extent. But there are some people who they need the reminder, and they go, oh yeah, what's that all about then? But maybe that's partly to do with, as I say, the types of people we end up actually going to canvass. I mean, I was saying, you just showing there, we've got our young voter target letter going out at the moment. We've always got that bring photo ID on there so that people know, because we really don't want people to be disenfranchised. I know that the council staff have been concerned about it. I think they're slightly nervous about how this is all going to play out. But
I've always been of the opinion that the Lib Dems will probably be least affected by it. I think I think it will hit poorer ethnic minorities and also the very old, which tends to be Labour and then later the Tory vote. But it's still a rotten thing. And actually, it is interesting that on all literature from all parties in Preston is going very hard on letting people know that it's voter ID, because I think this is something which sounded good in the brains of a right-wing government, but not actually practical on the door. And I wonder if it will hurt both the two main parties more than anybody else. And one thing it does do is cause confusion. So I had a chap on the phone ring me up, and I knocked on his door. He's in this three-way marginal that we've got in Preston, and he said, "Oh, yeah, I told you the other day that I'm definitely voting Lib Dem. I'm definitely voting for George. But I've lost my polling card. Now, I've looked everywhere. I can't find it. Does that mean I can't vote?" And I obviously reassured him, no, it doesn't. It's never meant you can't vote, no matter your polling card. But it's added a level of uncertainty into voters' minds that was just unnecessary.
Yeah, it has done. And it's... What can you say about such a sort of a bonkers suggestion? Really, they won't listen to reason. They won't listen to the fact that even the Electoral Commission is telling them that, look, we're not really ready for this. We're not sure how it's going to do, how it's going to go.
And take the voter ID of the new voter scheme has been pitiful, 3%, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, they do argue that, obviously not everyone has got elections this time, and some of those will be people who haven't got elections this time anyway. But I still don't think that really holds water. I think also that's probably an indicator to a degree of the fact that, and this might be something we'll talk about shortly, but a lot of people are just fed up with politics and have switched off and are not interested in voting this time anyway. So why would they bother getting their voter ID certificate?
Yeah, and I wonder if the local elections is a useful almost kind of test for the general election. If it goes well, I don't think the Tories might not care if it goes catastrophically wrong, but if there are genuine, real problems even within the Tory vote, it's better to do this now from a Tory point of view in the local elections than wait to the general, where it will have a more significant impact potentially on them.
Although I think I read something in the New Statesman the other day that was suggesting that the strange reverse psychology of this argument is that the Conservatives are not thinking that it's going to be quite as effective at suppressing the vote in the local elections as it will be at the general elections.
Oh, right, okay. Well, we'll see. Time will tell. One thing I do want to point out. So there was as always, Twitter isn't the real world. Where there's a leaflet going around from a Tory leaflet, I think in Norfolk, which actually says you don't need ID to vote.
Yeah, I saw
that. The commentator says, "Oh, this has been put in a heavily Labour area. It's disgraceful. And what it appears to have been." And I said straight away to my group when someone flagged it up on our group WhatsApp, and I said, "I reckon this is cock up rather than conspiracy." And I think it's just a template.
It's an old template,
an old template. But also, if you were thinking logically, who are the people that are going to read a Tory leaflet, even in a hardcore Labour area? The only people that are going to read that are Tory voters. So actually, that's probably done more harm than anything else to Tory chances than to Labour chances. But I think it just shows people are nervous about voter ID. One of the things that came up, which was really interesting in Preston, is we were talking about where will we get the figures for how many people have been turned away. Now, those figures are not going to be made public initially. They're going to be sent to the government, and then the government will allow local councils to release that data later on, especially if you do a freedom of information request. However, there's a big caveat in that, is that particularly in our patch, and I don't know if it's being replicated across the country, our council is having, as well as the poll clerks inside the polling station, they're also going to have a greeter on the outside, near where we do all our telling stuff, who is going to tell people, is going to welcome people, check they've got ID. At that point, if they say I haven't got ID and walk off, those are not recorded. So actually the level of people that are turned away is going to be artificially lower than what actually the reality is, which again, it just smacks of the Tories being crap.
Yeah, it does. I mean, actually, yeah, that's more, and I think that's more to do with the reporting that they're doing, because the greeter itself is probably a good idea, at least at this time.
Yes, I agree.
Not the recording. I mean, and I would say to candidates and people, obviously, we have to be very careful at polling stations how we behave, and we don't exceed what we're allowed to do. But I would just say, do spare a thought a little bit more for the polling station staff this time than perhaps might have been done in the past, because they are going to have some difficult conversations, and they're going to have to deal with some angry people, and it's not necessarily going to be pleasant for them. Yeah. So, just be mindful of that, really.
And I suppose as we as we're running up to polling day, and obviously this is a very campaigning focused podcast, do remember that the key points for your telling during the day are probably from 3 p.m, so just as you get towards the school run, to about 7 till 8 p.m. at night. So they'll be the points you need to get. And so if you're make sure you train up your tellers. Make sure you let them know about the IDs different. Make sure there might be some people that instead of bringing their polling card, bring their ID instead. So just all the things you need to know about. You are allowed to ask them very politely for a surname or something like that. They can refuse anything you ask, by the way. And like you said, make sure your tellers know what they are and aren't allowed to do. Right, let's get on to how this is feeling for us now, this election. So we've done lots of Lib Dems have been out and about, because we know. So far this month, over 800,000 doors have been knocked on, and the amount of data that's brought in is in the hundreds upon hundreds of thousands into the Lib Dems. So we're getting a pretty decent picture as a party of how it's looking. But for Martin, let's go for you first, because you actually just break down exactly. You are heavily Tory-facing Southern Council, is that correct?
That's right, heavily Tory-facing. So Horsham's a predominantly rural district. About in Sussex, it's about halfway between London and Brighton, basically to give you a picture of where it is. And at the moment, it's 29 Conservative seats on the council, 13 Lib Dems, three Greens, and 3 Independents. But to be honest with you, 2 of those Independents are disgruntled Tories who've left the party. So they won 32 at the last election, and they've been in control for 24 years. So that's the sort of area we're in. I mean, the Liberal Democrats are predominantly strong at the moment in the main town, in the town of Horsham, which has got about a third of the seats on the council. We do have a couple of seats in the adjacent village, but we're looking this time to basically, as Richard Kemp would have it, abolish the Conservatives in Horsham Town if we possibly can.
You'd probably use worse language than that. Actually.
Yeah.
You've done well.
but also move out into some of those villages and rural areas as well, because that's the only way we're actually going to take control of the council. So that's where how it breaks down, and the our strongest targets are predominantly in the north of the district, and but we are standing everywhere, as are the Greens. They're a little bit more focused in the south of the district, but we're both standing everywhere.
Yeah. So, but I mean, how are you getting on? Because I mean, in Preston, we've done. I literally just checked the figures. Then we've hit nearly 12,000 voter contact attempts in the course of the last year, in terms of getting a good rounded picture of where the vote is moving to and from, what's happened since Liz Truss, and everything else that's gone on. And I have to. So from Preston point of view, we have got 3 defences in Tory suburbs. What were Tory suburbs, now Lib Dem suburbs, and we've got a 3-way marginal in the last of the suburbs, and then we've got the rural seats which we're trying to take. So we're not hitting Labour in the centre of the city yet. We would love to be able to do more, and actually, weirdly enough, we actually have candidates now lined up for next year, because as this wheel turns and as the Labour becomes steadily more unpopular, we want to be able to capitalise that. So you have to start building that presence now. But let's talk about where we think the Tories might be, first of all. So myself personally, I think the Tory vote is still incredibly soft. It is still disgruntled, but it's not in free fall anymore, I would say. Based on where we're tracking it, I think what Rishi Sunak has done, I think his phrase when he became leader to the 1922 committee was "unite or die," and I think there's a little bit of that actually. I think they have actually kind of coalesced. Is that what you think?
I think so. I mean, it's not sort of getting worse all the time. I think we meet some, when we're knocking on the doors, we meet some people who clearly have historically been Conservative voters, and they sort of, I'm not voting for them this time. I'm fed up with it. They kind of break down three ways really. There's the ones who sort of don't really want to talk to you, sometimes politely, sometimes not. You know, they're probably Conservatives or they're fed up with politics altogether. There's the ones who are sort of, no, I'm not voting for them this time. I've always voted for them, but I can't anymore, and I'm voting for you. And then there's an interesting group that you meet who are, I've always voted for Conservative, but I can't. Just can't now. Yeah. And I don't know what I'm going to do. Sometimes that's a kind of, I haven't made up my mind yet. But a surprising number of people, or maybe it's not in our part of the world, I literally don't know what to do. I can't do what I've done my whole life, and now I don't know what my other options are. Sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think that's linked to us. So I've just got the figures down for all the 10,000 different doors and people that we've knocked on and checked to. And actually, there is, and I completely agree with, there is a three-way split happening to that Tory vote. So there's, anyone who's listened to this podcast, and I realise we're in a Lib Dem bubble, how can anyone still vote Tory? How can anyone do it? I don't understand it. But there were people who are lifelong and who whatever, and they may absolutely be appalled at what Liz Truss did and what Boris Johnson did and everything else, but their natural position is that they are Tory, and they are still going to retain that chunk of that vote. But that, I do think a chunk of that vote will just not bother this time. It's a local election. They're less maybe invested in it than what it would be if it was a general. And so I'm predicting the Tory vote to drop. It dropped significantly last year. In our local elections. So 2021 was an absolute peak for the Tories, for us, in terms of their vote. They've never had it so easy in terms of getting their vote out. It dropped significantly last year, and I think it's going to drop further this year. And it'll be interesting to see what turnout. The leader of Wire, which is really blue, I think the last time that they were up they do all up, so they were up 4 years ago. And I think they got maybe 27% turnout in those days, like 4 years ago. And I imagine it's going to get even worse. So is that where you think the Tories will be, are going to drop even further?
I think they will do. I always say, though, that there's a concrete floor on the Conservative vote, that there's just a number it just won't go below. And obviously they're stronger in the postal votes than we are, and postal votes generally are returned. So I'm a bit of a cautious cat anyway. I do think it'll be down, but as you say, in terms of on what, it's with us, we're an all-up council, so it's only every 4 years for the districts. And although we did have the county council elections, as you say, they were 2 years ago, 2021, vaccine bounce, all of that. It's hard to read, really. So I think.
One of the most annoying things when you're a canvasser, because I love canvassing, I've done an absolute ton both this last month and throughout the year, is actually I hate won't says. I like to get good, accurate data. And so you do all the same tricks.
Dislike. We don't hate anyone.
No. As in, I hate getting the data won't say it. No. I don't hate the people who won't do it, because a lot of them are people who are probably not sure where they're going to, like you're saying, people who had been rock hard Tories in the past and now don't know. But I hate putting in the data won't say. Again, all those people that were used to minivan, there are lots of options there for usual support. How did they vote in 2019? All the rest of it. So there are ways you can build that voter profile for that person. But because in some of these areas that we're going into, and I'll talk a little bit about Preston Rural North, which is a seat that has never, ever been anything but Tory. We can't find in the history books when it wasn't Tory. And our polling is showing us only a couple of percentage behind from basically getting 19% last year, doing virtually nothing. We are right on the cusp, but we're getting people And again, for people who are fairly new to canvassing, if you're breaking into a ward for the first time you speak to people, you have to remember that they may never have been canvassed before, or it may have been decades before they've been canvassed. And so they'll have a natural caution to letting you know. I mean, there are ways you can get round of it, such as saying, is there any party you wouldn't vote for? Who would you normally vote for? Or things like, rather than the blunt question. But I think a significant chunk of those won't says, back in 2021, we didn't quite read that right, and it was a mistake I made, others that. The won't says were coming from Lib Dem leaning people, maybe probable Lib Dems, and what we didn't take it for was actually that people were just going to stay at home or switch to the Tories because of the vaccine bounce. Now, from our data, it is the solid Tory vote that is going won't say. Now, and that will be split three ways. People that will hold the nose and still vote Tory.
Yeah.
People that will maybe switch to us, and there'll be lots of people that will stay at home. And that's that's going to be the key thing. And we've got to do for the next week is hit as many that not hit. I'm going to get in trouble, but canvass those won't say people again and see if that shifted any. Really, and this is when we talk about targeting. It really becomes important about winning is about data. We spoke to those people. We know the people that there's no chance are going to vote for us. We know the people that haven't voted in whatever time and are still not going to vote. That group of people who are wobbly, we need to know which way they're going to go.
Yeah, indeed. And it's a challenge in our area. We're getting better at doing canvassing. We're all very aware that it's what we need to be doing, but we're a bit kind of enthusiasm rich but resource poor, really, in terms of getting it. And we've had some decisions to make in this campaign about because we're coming from a lower base and really trying to build up how high do we set our sights and what implications does that have for what we want to do? Because the opportunity is there on the table to take the council. To do that, we have to take a certain number of seats. To do that, we have to leaflet all of those seats. But the more seats you leaflet, the less canvassing you can actually do just because of the resource you've got. And, it's just getting coverage of sufficient doors canvassing-wise in the first place, let alone being able to go around and, as you say, do that really important follow-up work again. I think one of the things that I would say is quite important about canvassing is, especially when you're going to no data doors or people you don't know about, is try and build up some of that history. Make sure you ask those questions about who do you usually vote for? Where did you vote? Who did you vote for last time? Rather than just who you're going to vote for this time, because that can help you know how things are moving, if you don't already have that record for them in the past.
The way we've
and if I can just say as well, I think if a message out to ALDC that's coming back from a couple of people is that we all know we need to canvass more. We know that we need to get people canvassing more, and that message does come through. But I think a bit more training on how to canvass and some more resources on training canvassers and giving them the confidence to do it, because it's a big thing to ask someone to do without sort of telling them how to do it,
Yeah, and by all means, anyone listening to this or watching this who wants to, we've done our little training kind of takes on canvassing. So go on to either wherever you get your podcasts, or go onto the YouTube and type in Canvassing 101. I think we did an updated version one for this year as well. My brain, I've got kind of campaign brain, so I can't remember exactly, but I think we've done one last year and this year on the do's and don'ts in canvassing, ways you can help yourself and things like that as an introduction to it. But you're absolutely right, man. We're in the same position in terms of the Tory. We've got the Tories won't be this unpopular for a long time. We might get another shot at them next year as well, because I have noticed that quite a lot of political commentators are saying this is the last test before the general. Well, it's not. There's actually, for those of us who are up in thirds, we might have another set of locals next year. But so we've really much as a local party said, look, we've got this year and next year to make those breakthroughs that we want to do, to break into those Tory suburbs and rural seats that have been Tory for decades and decades. And so we are pushing ourselves, we are stretching ourselves, But part of that, and it's maybe too late for this year, but going forward for you, is actually how important your summer campaigns are, your off-election year campaigns are to build out. So we, in my ward, which is probably the safest of the Lib Dem seats in Preston, we did a whole load of work in summer, making sure our vote is where it needs to be. And so when it comes to the election campaign, we can make sure we keep our presence, make sure we deliver the leaflets, make sure we do kind of sample canvassing to make sure our vote isn't switching. And again, for those people, I don't want to get you with bore you with the nerdy stuff, but there is really good resource out there on switch analysis to make sure if your vote is moving or not. And we've checked our held wards, and they are all looking very healthy for us. And that gives us the confidence to think, right, if they're healthy, can we put a slightly higher percentage of our effort trying to take these Tory wards or whatever ward you're trying to? And it's really important. We talk about loads, it's about money, manpower, data. And when you get into this part of the campaign, this is when the data allows you to make really good strategic decisions. Touch wood, hopefully, and I'm not going to fall on my face when when I lose my seat next week.
No, I know what you mean, and I tend to think with these things as well. It's the more you get into this, and the more you get into it. I mean, I've only really been active for about the past 3 or 4 years, but there's always more to learn, and the more you find out about what you could be doing, should be doing, the more you could always sort of think, oh, how are we ever going to get to that? But it's about those incremental improvements sometimes, and looking where you've come from, and having the desire to do more and to take it to that next level.
And remember, you know, sometimes it's breaking into bite-sized chunks. I think for people. I mean, I know we're like a week away. It'll all be done by this point in a week's time. But you know, so for one of our target wards, we've now knocked on every single street in that ward. We're not spoken to everyone, you know, that's you'll never get that. But then as we've got closer and closer to the election, we have whittled it down to those target groups, the postal voters, the marked registered voters, the people that are Lib Dem leaning, the soft Tories, the soft Labour. And so actually some of those people, we're doing that street now for the 4th time. Because we target your effort. If we were to do every house all the time, we'd get a whole load of people who never vote. We get a whole load of people who never vote for us. But because we have that data, and by the way, everyone, one of your first jobs you should do after the election, other than sleep, maybe see your family, is actually get that marked register. You are allowed to know who vote, and it is the most useful resource. So even in, like, say, this rural North Ward, which we've never tried before, we know who votes. We know who votes. And you can target people who you know vote and people that are new on the register this year. And you do those two, you're going to cover quite a significant chunk of everyone that's going to vote in that time. So, but that's
I mean, and not to depress people, because everyone's sort of like, oh my God, I just want to get this done now. But you know, the fun never stops to a degree. But there are those things like get your expenses in, get your marked registers, get your thank you focus out, and then get your summer survey ready, and then before you actually put it out, have a rest, and then go again. But that all leads to that regular contact with people in your area, that presence that you have. I mean, it's like you were saying about your ward, which I believe is Cadley, where it's quite strong. We're in Trafalgar, where I am. We've held this one for 28 years. My ward partner, I'll give a shout out to her, Christine Costin, like your colleague. She's stepping this down after being councillor for 28 years. Well, it's you know, how have we done that? How have we rode it out through thick and thin? Well, because it's the ward that, you know, rain or shine, we've got the regular focuses out, and you just keep cranking it. And you know, the places that we win and gain next time is going to be really important to just, we want to turn those places into Trafalgar, you know, by doing that work and building up that relationship with the people locally.
And I think sometimes you'll get to things, you will get people and areas, like in the 2 areas we're trying to break into this year, where they'll go, oh, we could just use more people. You know, we could just, you know, it's always when you're trying to break into a ward, you never have enough people. You'll never have enough people. Because people need to, you know, people like voting for winners, people like being associated with winners. And those wards, for a long, long time, haven't had a massive reason to be particularly interested in what the Lib Dems are doing. Now they are, but it will take us winning and working after that winning, or even narrowly losing. This is the point. I mean, last year we narrowly lost, and we've built upon that to hopefully win it this time. So that's the key. But like I say, we realise a week out, the idea of us saying, you've got to go do some more hand summer. It's not what probably one of people hear. But I'm just saying, no matter what happens next week, there's no such thing as actually a bad canvas session. There's no such thing as actually a bad set of data that you're getting, because it all is money in the bank ready for future campaigns.
Even bad news is great data. That's how you feel, how you get to feel good about that person who gives you a nasty reception on the door and says, "No, thank you, not interested in you whatsoever." Slam. Well, I never have to go to that door again. Easy.
Yeah, that's right. And it's all very interesting. And like I said, it's not the data; it's how you use it. So, person yesterday, because there are people. By this point, we stopped knocking on postal voters. The vast majority of them have gone, but every now and again, one slips into our list because they signed up right at the end, or it's a household which has postal voters and non-postal voters in it. And so a chap said yesterday he's already voted Labour in our three-way marginal, which was and at this point again, I want to just a health check, and we did this on the local election diocese. You will get the wobbles at this point in the campaign. You'll think everyone that you hoped would vote Lib Dem but actually voted Labour or something like that. You'll think it's like the end of the world. It's like, how could they? But just take a breath and you realise that it will be okay. But I got the two worst. So I got a Labour guy I was hoping to convert who had stayed Labour. And then I got a Lib Dem guy who didn't know, but he said, "I am absolutely going to vote Lib Dem, but I'm away on polling day and I forgot to sort out my postal vote." It's like, oh no, like the worst things you could hear. But you've just got to crack on. And again, that's good data. We know for next time. Better believe he's probably going to get a postal vote recruitment form over summer.
Yes.
But Martin, let's talk about Labour. Let's talk about how, because I find this really interesting at the moment, because Labour obviously has had a shortening in the polls, which is interesting. But that's supposed. I made lots of points when Labour was riding high in the polls. That was artificially high because that was done by Tories going won't know rather than masses of support for Labour.
Absolutely.
And now that the won't knows have firmed up a little bit. That's right. So and so I feel, and I get the feeling that Labour are very complacent that they will win seats that they are not going. They think they're going to win seats that they won't. And I want to talk a little bit about this three-way marginal, which we have been absolutely gunning in Preston, because I've quite enjoyed it actually, having a three-way marginal. We haven't had one in a very long time. So all the political parties are within 200 votes of each other, and so it really is anyone. And the Greens have dropped out, who would have the Green votes would mean anyone gets those Green votes wins. But I do get the feeling Labour are relying on a national swing rather than their own hard work. And our polling now for that ward, from all the doors we've knocked on, shows us winning. Right. Now, we've got to get that over the line, and there's a stubborn Tory vote. We don't know. And the won't says in that case are my biggest nervousness, because I think, okay, if that's a won't say that will go Labour, they might win it. If they won't say stay at home at Tory, they might win it. Or if they stay at home or come to us, we might win it. But what are your impressions of Labour at the moment, Martin?
Well, we're in a slightly interesting area around here, because Labour have never won an election for anything, for any ward or seat or anything in the Horsham district since 1974. But they have got this polling bounce nationally, and there are a couple of areas where Labour are a bit of an issue for us, and there's a couple of reasons. One is there's one ward where most of the local Labour people live, and they're quite a Corbynist group, and also Horsham. It's got two reasons why we get lots of people moving from London or out of London boroughs here, they either come into the town because they're commuters, or they come into some of the other areas because they're looking for the, move out of the city. And so it takes time to make people aware of what the situation is here is. That, so it's Lib Dem versus Conservative here rather than. So that can be a bit challenging. But we've got one area that probably is in your three-way marginal category because it's Conservative held. Yeah. We were the challengers. We've been the challengers, but the Labour are putting a lot of work in there. And then there's one in another ward that we hold quite comfortably, but Labour always put a lot of work into that one. And it's probably now gone from being a three-way marginal to being basically a Labour-facing ward for us. In this ocean of blue, we have a Labour-facing ward. So that's an interesting dynamic. And obviously they're doing all the things without saying, the national polling's massive. Worthing down in the south has gone Labour. And they're putting out statistics saying, we're 20 points ahead of the Lib Dems round here, which is just nonsense. But so that does lead to the wobbles a little bit in terms of campaigning, because you don't want to take people for granted. You don't want to sit on the laurels, but also you don't want to be putting resource in to the wrong places when you need to be using it in the places that you might take off the Tories. So it's always a balance. It's always a challenge.
I think that's where the data comes in. I'm just going to share with Martin so you can see what I'm talking about our three-way marginal on his WhatsApp. So I'm not going to put this on screen for viewers just because it shows you how many doors and stuff we've got. But we've got a significant chunk of data in our three-way marginal about where it's going. And if you were looking at that, and based on national polls, you'd assume it. But also, what you want to do if you're worried about Labour bouncing back, and we knew obviously the result last year, we knew where we were, and so it's easier again if you have results every year like we do. You can kind of track movements a bit more. So last year we knew obviously we got the result, not the result we'd wanted. Like I say, Labour even pipped us into second, which makes it a lot more difficult. But actually we knew, our candidate last year had snapped his ankle playing tennis, so he couldn't really campaign. So obviously, so this year we banned tennis, and we're able to do significant more. But what we did is we were out in June. We were out starting this campaign in June to be able to build up a degree of data and a degree of momentum behind our candidate George to be able to get there. Now, again, everything, I don't know. Three-way marginals are a nightmare to predict. We are doing everything we can to try and win that. But on Friday next week, this all eyes are on this ward, basically in the whole of Preston. So it will be very interesting to see how it's done. But I say, Labour, every area is different, but Labour aren't massively great at campaigning here in Preston. They are used to having their solid wards, don't have to worry about it. No one challenges them particularly, and they have got out of the habit of knowing how to campaign. So I think Labour will do all right. I do generally think, though, for people out there, the polling data about leadership and about Keir Starmer is grim for Labour. And I don't know. And that has actually been a better indicator of general election success. It's not about the general national picture polling, but actually how leaders are rated. And Keir Starmer is struggling. And that generally is reflected on the door.
Yeah, I mean, I think they've got a bit of a problem, Labour, certainly here in some of their parties, in that, they should be you're talking about Rishi Sunak saying to the Conservatives, unite or die. Well, to the Labour Party, it's kind of unite or lose again.
Yeah.
I just, a lot of their most fervent activists that they've got, I'm not saying they're necessarily good, but they're hard working. Don't really have much enthusiasm for Keir Starmer. His kind of power base is not amongst the most active part of their campaigners. So I don't think that I don't sense an awful lot of unity of purpose and team spirit around around Labour at the moment, and
But I don't spot that in their voters either. This is the key. I think you're right about their activists, actually, because some of them, whatever happened with Corbyn and Diane Abbott and everything else. I mean, the Diane Abbott thing hasn't helped them because it just kind of opens up memories of what had happened over the last few years. But actually, when you talk to Labour-leaning voters, and again, I'm in this three-way marginal where Labour came narrowly second last time, you would think it would be incredibly tough for us to switch these Labour people on. But actually, it's been very, not easy, but it hasn't been difficult because they understand, because there's no great enthusiasm. It's not like Tony Blair's going to ride in on the White Knight that's going to destroy the Tories. And I said years ago, and I hope I'm right, is that Keir Starmer might just be the perfect kind of Labour leader for the Lib Dems, as in he's not Corbyn. Yeah. He's not threatening to Tory voters, even though some Tories really dislike him, as in some voters. But he's not going to enthuse anyone either. He's not. He might just be that perfect midpoint that the Lib Dems need a Labour leader to be.
Possibly so. Yeah. I mean, you don't sense an awful lot of flight of people just being won over by this incredibly charismatic character who has turned them from being anti-conservative to pro-Labour, because that in an area like this that can be a problem, whereby it just ends up sending anti-conservative votes to the wrong place, because we are clearly the challengers here. But I think also just as a party we are more united. We're the one that is at the moment, and I feel that inside our local party and our local group as well. I mean, I think the team spirit is massive at the moment. There's real enthusiasm, real unity of purpose. I don't really know a lot about what's happening with the Labour Party because I try and steer clear of them largely.
Avoid that psychodrama.
But I tell you what, that is not what's happening in the Conservative Party at the moment. They are tearing each other to pieces, and they've got no activists. They've got half a dozen people who might knock on doors, but almost none of their literature is delivered by their members because no one wants to do it. Nobody wants to go out and see people. It's and they really are in the doldrums, and I think they're just hoping that inertia is going to carry them over.
Yeah, and it's really interesting that I meant to raise that actually. The amount of literature that is being delivered commercially by Labour and the Tories is surprising for me. And you can always tell when it's commercial, because you can see them, you can see the guys that are doing it, the commercial company. Also, they tend to be put through really shabbily. If you see someone with a wooden spatula, you think someone who's that's a volunteer, yes. But actually. And we've seen it all over, like leaflets left on doorsteps, hanging out, virtually not put in the letterbox, all these kind of signs that it was commercially done. But what that is also interesting, because you only have a really small amount of money to spend during an election period. The cost of print has gone up massively. The amount you're allowed to spend hasn't gone up massively. Yeah. And the cost of getting commercial delivery is actually quite expensive as well. Yeah. So again, when I see a Tory leaflet getting delivered commercial, I think, well, that's taken out maybe 50% of their election spend. So there's not going to be a right lot left for anything else they want to do.
No. I mean, we have had to use a bit of paid delivery in our area just to make sure we get everything out. We've tried to not do it in the same ward twice, to just measure it around so that we know that something gets delivered, and it's been an important tool to be able to use. But it just kind of have the side benefit that there's only really one affordable local delivery company. So I sort of think, well, every time we use them, that's one less time that the Tories have got to deliver their stuff, and they haven't got anyone else to fall back on. So it's a double bubble, really.
Yeah, and again, if people are wondering how they're going to get going forward about, well, delivery takes a long time and things like that, and we don't have manpower. Again, obviously, there's a whole thing about recruitment which we'll do over summer. But actually, things like, again, your targeting. Why don't you just, instead of doing a leaflet to the whole area, do a direct mail thing to your marked voters or something like that?
Yeah.
So all these ways that you can save money and time by being slightly more targeted, but. That is for another episode. So, Martin, I want to thank you very much for coming on.
No, you're welcome.
To all those candidates, campaigners, and groups out there, keep going. You're nearly there. We're at the verge, and whether it's you're pushing yourselves and stretching yourself like Martin is and I am to break through, or you're standing in for the first time. Maybe you're trying to end a black hole. Maybe you're the first Lib Dem candidate in an area for ages. You might not win. And there's I lost my first proper campaign by 1%, and it felt wretched. But you know what? You take that, you learn from it, and I've won the next 7. So that's the key to it. And just keep going. By all means, a problem shared is a problem halved. So if you're feeling like, oh, this isn't going right, just talk to someone, talk to me, talk to Martin, find us on social media, go onto the ALDC Facebook group and just share your problems and things like that. And you will get through this. We are on the verge of maybe doing something wonderful. So just keep door knocking, keep delivering, keep optimistic, and keep going, Martin. Do you agree with that?
I absolutely would do. I think it's hard work, but a lot of it's fun, and keep, as you say, keep going. And I promise you, whatever the result is, you'll look back on this with pride. And the thing that sort of keeps me going some of the time as well is I want to be there at the count, knowing that there wasn't anything else we could have done.
Yeah,
and then it makes it that much more sweet if you win, and it makes it that much more bearable if you lose. If you've done everything that you could have done, but if you're there sort of going, oh, we could have had this one if we'd, don't be there. Just keep going, and it'll be worth it.
Right, wonderful. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for watching and listening us today. And everyone who supported us on the Lib Dem podcast. I do realise we have been a bit quieter over the last month because of the campaigns, but we'll have loads more following on from the local elections when we've all had a nap, B, maybe, like I say, seen our family again, and because whatever happens in the local election, the Lib Dem podcast is going to continue, and we'll be giving you lots of advice, hints and tips, as well as the latest news breakdowns going forward. Because, we haven't even talked about what's going on in Scotland, but that can wait. They haven't got elections next week, so we will deal with Scotland coming up and what that means for the general election. We've got our host, David Mackenzie, is getting a panel together so we can have a proper chat about the ins and outs of Scottish politics, which might have to be a 3-part series, but we will deal with that going forward. But thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. And
I'll just say, for those of a certain age, don't underestimate the power of the orange side, and may the 4th be with you.
Absolutely. And with that, we will end today's episode. Thank you very much, everyone. Bye now.
Cheers. Bye.